So in this video, I'm going to show you how to build your circuits using both wires and switches. And I'm going to start with a series circuit as shown in my diagram over here. So you can see in this case that the switch is between the two lights. So I'm going to start by connecting one end of one light bulb to one end of my switch, and then the other end of my switch to one end of the other light bulb. So I'm going to start by connecting a wire from this end of my first light to this end of my switch. So I'm going to take my wire here, starting with the light bulb, and twist it around a couple times to make a secure connection. And then for the switch, I'm going to slide my wire under the brad here, and then twist the wire around a couple of times, and then press it down to make that connection secure. So now I have my first connecting wire here. The next thing that I have to do is connect this end of the switch to this end of my other light. So I'm going to take my second wire and, starting with the light, twist it around a few times to make a secure connection. And then with the switch, slide the wire under the brad and then twist it around a few times to make a secure connection, and then press it down to make sure that stays put. Now I have this whole yellow wire here between one light, the switch, and the other light connected on my circuit. The last things we need to do are connect one end of one light to the positive side of the battery and the other end of the other light to the negative side of the battery. So I'm going to take my two wires here, blue for negative and red for positive, and I'm going to put my blue wire over here on this end of my first light. Then I'm going to put my red wire over here on my second light. And now that my battery wires are connected, I can take my battery, put the red wire to the positive end, and put the blue wire to the negative end. And then I have a fully functional circuit in series with a switch. So now I'm going to go over how to build a parallel circuit with a switch. And in this specific example, the switch is placed kind of near the battery on the positive side, but before the wires split down to get to each of my lights. So if you look closely here, if I go from the red side of the first light to the red side of the second light, I'm only crossing over wire here, which means that I can just connect these two ends with a wire without having to put the switch in yet. And then same thing on the opposite side. I can go from the blue side of my first light to the blue side of my second light just by using wire. So that means that I'm only going to use wire to connect these two ends to each other, and then also these two ends to each other. So I'm going to start with these two. I'm going to take my wire and twist it onto first light, and then twist it onto my second light, and then do the same for the other side, starting with one light over here and twisting it to get a solid connection, and then doing the same for the other side. And now you can see that I have a secure connection for both ends of both lights here. The next step is to put the switch in. Now, if I look at my circuit diagram again, I can see that I can go directly from this middle light here to one end of the switch. And since these two lights are already connected, I only have to connect the switch to the middle light, not to both lights here. So I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to twist one end onto this end of the light bulb right here. Twist it a couple times, get a secure connection. Then I'm going to do the same by connecting this wire to the switch. Now I have my switch connected into the circuit. The final step here is to connect to the battery, and you can see that one end of the battery, the positive end, goes to the switch on the opposite side from where we just connected, and the other end of the battery just goes directly to the lights. And same as before, I can only use the middle light to connect to the battery since I already connected these two lights together. So I'm going to start by just taking my blue negative battery wire and putting it on this end of the light. And then I'm going to take my red positive battery wire and I'm going to connect it to the switch on the opposite side from where I connected the light earlier. So now I have my battery wires connected, so I can take my battery, put the blue wire on the negative side, and then put the red wire on the positive side, and now I have my parallel circuit completed with a switch. Next, I'm going to show you how to build a different type of parallel circuit, one that has two switches, one switch to control each light. Now, if you are not building a circuit like this in your own house, then you can actually stop watching this video right now and just go back to building. But if you are building a circuit like this, you want to make sure to keep watching because it can be a little bit tricky and you want to make sure that you're doing everything right. So looking at my circuit diagram, I noticed that the bottom end of each light, the blue wire here, just goes from one end of the light to one end of the other light without passing through any switches. So that means that I can just use a wire to connect this end of this light to this end of the other light here. And that's going to be my starting point. So same as always, twist it around a couple times to get a secure connection and then do the same thing to the other side. And we're ready to move on to the next step. So going back to my circuit diagram, I noticed that on the top end of each light, it goes just directly from the light to the bottom end of the switch. And that's the same thing for both lights. So that means that I'm going to connect this end of my first light to the bottom end of my first switch here. Then I'm going to connect this end of my second light to the bottom end of my second switch over here. And that is my next step. And so now each one of my lights is connected to the switch that it goes with. The next step is to connect this top wire here. Now on my circuit diagram, I can see that it goes from the top end of one switch to the top end of the other switch. So that means that I'm going to connect this top end of the first switch to this top end of the second switch. So that step is now completed. The final connection that I have to make is for my battery wires. So on the positive side of the battery, I can see that it goes to the top end of my middle switch here. And then on the negative side, it goes directly to the bottom end of my middle light. So that means that I'm going to use this end here to connect to the negative end of the battery, and then this end here to connect to the positive end of the battery. So I'm going to start by connecting the positive end of the battery to my middle switch. And now I'm going to connect the negative end of the battery to my middle light. And so now all I need to do is actually put in my battery by connecting the blue wire to the negative side and the red wire to the positive side. And then I have my completed parallel circuit with two switches.